of our co-chairs. So this is Lars Alkunz, Lili Zhang, and also Bob Grossman and Anthony June, who aren't here today because they're in Chicago and it's just not reasonable. So here you have our link to the group website. So we're absolutely looking for members. If any of this is interesting to you, then we'd be very happy to have your support. And then we have the link to the collaborative notes. So this is from Understanding to Interoperability, findings from our working group on health data commons. So for anyone who's new to RDA, these are the 6 guiding principles of the RDA community: openness, community-driven, consensus, nonprofit, and technology neutral, harmonization, and inclusivity. So this group, it's a struggle to remember when we started the work on this a few years ago with the Birds of a Feather, and then subsequently an application to host a working group. And for RDA Tiger supports, we were the lucky beneficiaries of RDA Tiger support for a bit. So for us, Health Data Commons is a cloud-based software platform, the governance framework that enables the research community to manage, analyze, and share participant level health or biomedical data. So when we say share data, that could be through federated approaches, so privacy by design approaches, either TRE or federated learning, or some other kind of flavor of that, or it could be through enabling direct download or other data reuse modalities. So it doesn't have to be direct sharing. And we're thinking about biomedical data writ large. So we had some, back and forth about, should we call this health data? Should we call this biomedical data? Should we call this commons or spaces? And these terms are applied differently in different, geographies and contexts. So we mean this in a very broad sense, where we're considering different types of biomedical data. So clinical data from EHRs, genomic data, imaging data, research data, epidemiological surveillance data, environmental data that relate to human health, population health data, biobank data, survey data that are related to health or patient-reported outcomes. And then who health data commons are meant to serve really depends. So sometimes these are meant to serve national governments, sometimes they're meant to serve certain disease communities, sometimes they're meant to serve funders or policymakers. So understanding that is part of what we're interested in doing. And then health data commons, in this context, we're generally thinking about access and reuse of sensitive data. So we're really interested in what is the data governance framework and what are the plans for benefit sharing, and for ethical and equitable inclusion in the commons, but also then reuse of the data and the products of the data that are made available and mediated through the commons. So why do we think this is important? So in COVID-19, when we started this work, which was within the remit of CODATA, the Committee on Open Data, we found that folks, so geographies where they were thinking about implementing health data commons, were interested in understanding the implementation decisions of other health data commons. And so we thought, it would work well if we could consider creating a community of commons where people who are struggling with shared challenges could think about constructive ways forward. And one of the issues that we have in the implementation of the FAIR principles in the biomedical space and likely in other spaces is a fragmented implementation of FAIR. So even though folks are implementing FAIR, they're implementing FAIR in very different ways. And although any implementation of FAIR, we could argue, will help us with data identification, data reuse. If we have shared approaches to FAIR, so FAIR convergence, then it's easier to get to cross-study or cross-commons, cross-data set, participant-level data reuse, which is what we'd really like to go for. So from my side, I work on pandemic preparedness. So I work on the reuse of participant-level data and samples in the context of epidemics and pandemics. And in that context, we need very quick access to high quality, well-structured data to inform public health and research and development. So one of the reasons that we kind of came to this is through that work on pandemic and epidemic threats like antimicrobial resistance, which is an important global challenge. In the health data space, we see really fragmented ecosystems. So what we mean here is that data is siloed by type. So imaging data is often separate from clinical data, is often separate from surveillance data. And then we also see a siloing by disease. And then institutions may have these data siloed by disease, siloed by data type. Institutional data is itself siloed. So we really have a number of challenges in thinking about, what type of investments do we need to get to cross data infrastructure reuse of participant level data in a secure and equitable and ethical way. So everyone is on the AI train, whether or not they, want to be. And part of AI, AI that is helpful for clinical medicine or for research and development is really predicated on high quality, generally structured data. And so we really need to understand, where are we AI ready? So where can these data be used in equitable, ethical, transparent fashion for AI and biomedicine, and where are we not? Because the implementation of AI over high quality structured data also has the unintended consequence of basically widening health disparities and widening disparities in research because those who don't have access to this type of high quality structured biomedical data then cannot build these AI models and derive the benefits of those models. So this is important for us also from an equity standpoint. And then in terms of government investment, we would like to support governments and policymakers in making informed investments in research infrastructure, specifically large-scale digital public infrastructure. So health data commons are large-scale digital public infrastructures, and we'd like to support governments in deciding or determining, what would best practice look like, or what types of decisions should I make if I want to enable the federated reuse of participant level AMR related data across commons. So governments, policymakers, funders may have specific goals from research or from health data reuse, and understanding the implementation decisions of other commons can help them reach those goals. So we had done some previous work to try to understand what does semantic interoperability look like. So when we think about the implementation of standards for health data, so these could be metadata standards or participant level data standards, how researchers or institutions or health data commons implement standards has tremendous consequences. And one of the consequences is how these commons connect to one another. So within the genomics data space, there has been a real push at the global level to implement standards for genomic data, led in large part by GA4GH, which is a standards body. And you can see the results of this when you think about these are connections between research infrastructures in the COVID-19 data space. And if we look at the status of the implementation of standards in the clinical or epidemiological data space, so this is work we did some years ago, but the findings have been carried forward, I'd say. We see that we don't have that nice network. So we have a lot of kind of missed opportunities to connect different research infrastructures at the data level through standards. And when we have high quality metadata and we have interoperability, then we can federate models over those research infrastructures. So we can have federated by design, privacy by design approaches where the data are reused where they sit. So data sovereign approaches, which are becoming increasingly important in our space. So we're implementing this work under 3 different frameworks. So one is the FAIR principles. So everyone is familiar with that. The CARE principles are sometimes not familiar to folks. So these are collective benefit, authority to control, responsibility, and ethics. And authority to control, again, becomes really important as you see governments investing in, let's say, data extraction type approaches to health data. And then the trust principles are principles that were developed to identify trusted research infrastructure. So these are related to the core trust seal, if you've heard of that. And these are transparency, responsibility, user focus, and sustainability. So these are the kind of the three different frameworks to try to understand and guide our analysis of implementation decisions by health data commons. So we had a number of objectives for this working group. We started out coming from the Global Open Research Commons implementation model, and GORC, believe, started in 2017. So it's really a long-standing working group within RDA. And GORC has done tremendous work in terms of community engagement to build a metadata profile for global open research commons. And we wanted to think about what happens when we apply the GORC model to the health data space, because many data spaces may have kind of fewer sensitivity issues, and we may have more specific biomedical data related questions that won't have been included in a more general kind of implementation of global open research commons. So we started out from the GORC's group and wanting to describe these implementation decisions. And so we thought we would conduct a scoping review to identify and describe existing or planned health and biomedical data commons or spaces. So we started that with the ambition to just think about cross-national or national health or biomedical data commons, but then we expanded that to go to state or departmental level, and in some cases disease level data commons. And we also developed a health data commons survey. Again, these are trying to understand what are the implementation decisions that commons have made along different axes. So thinking about access conditions and permissions, data governance structures, how benefit sharing is being addressed, how the care principles are being addressed, compliance with different regulatory frameworks, and then what types of data are included, what are the standards for the metadata or standards for the data for those different data types, what are the disease areas, what are the populations that are included. So we had a number of kind of questions that were of interest to the health data commons community. And then we wanted to kind of combine one and two, so combine kind of the pre-existing work on the GORC implementation model and our own work on the scoping review and survey to then represent, come up with a GORC implementation model for the health and biomedical data space. So that is something that we haven't gotten to yet for sure. And then further from that, we'd like to have a living map of these metadata-based implementation decisions. So what I mean by that is we can structure these implementation decisions in a network graph and then represent that graph. So we're working on trying to collect some responses to our survey so that we can build out a prototype dashboard that represents the different implementation decisions in a network graph. And the goal there is that folks obviously are making implementation decisions when they're building their commons, and they would like to see what is the status of how other commons are addressing these shared challenges, and so that's why we basically see the survey as at this point kind of the best place for us to get that implementation metadata and then represented in a living data dashboard that's a network graph. So this was our work plan and timeline. I would have to say that we have deviated from our timeline. So this is largely related to limitations on the part of the co-chairs in terms of doing the work and not a huge participation from the community. So one thing that we're interested in is trying to build community interest in this work and support. But we are a bit off on our timeline. So we've asked for an extension of our working group, which is meant to finalize our findings and deliverables in June of this year. And we've asked for an extension until this November, which we've kindly received from RDA. So we developed this implementation metadata survey. I misspelled the word survey, but you get the point. So here, this is the introduction to the survey, but which is written out in REDCap. So REDCap is a GDPR compliant open source survey platform. This is the link to the survey itself. And then we decided to split our Health Data Commons implementation metadata survey into three parts. One was general questions about a commons. One was technical questions, and there's another one that it'll come to me in a minute. The reason that we split this up is because we felt that Health Data Commons might have different people that they would need to ask to answer the different parts of the survey. And we tried to keep the survey, like, so if you go through the three kind of sections of the survey, our hope is that it wouldn't take you more than 10 to 15 minutes. So we know that people have no time to complete these types of surveys. And so our strategy to try to get folks to complete the survey was to keep it as short as possible and also to tie it to a data dashboard. So we're not able to tie it to a data dashboard until we get some survey responses. And so far we have not gotten responses. So we're working on that. And so this is the last section of the survey, which is a non-technical additional questions related to that we felt were not kind of the most essential. So we kept the most essential in the first section, and then folks who wanted to answer additional questions could, or if they just wanted to submit the survey after kind of the first 5 minutes, then they could do that by just completing the first section of the survey. So again, we have 7 very basic questions that we see as the most important for trying to understand implementation decisions across health and biomedical data commons. We have 3 survey sections, a number of metadata topics, and then we will be sharing the output of the survey. So the survey went through ethics review at the University of Colorado, where Bob Grossman is based. And it was deemed exempt from human subjects research because we are just asking people about implementation decisions for their health data comments. Right. So in terms of the survey sections, again, we have information on at what level the commons is, at what level folks have access to the data, the access mechanism, the implementation stage, API availability. We have implementation metadata and data access conditions, the data protection frameworks that apply, data governance, ethical concerns, standards used, data types included, health domains covered, populations, funding source, data source, and persistent identifiers. And then we also have questions related to funding and sustainability concerns, location of the commons, data types and sources, and then also populations and health domains. So this is where we are thinking more about equitable inclusion of different populations in the commons. And in terms of thinking about ethics and governance and benefit sharing, so part of that is asking about applicable data protection legislation. Part of that is asking commons how they see themselves as addressing the CARE principles. Part of it is understanding the commons data governance approach, how they're interacting with or engaging marginalized populations. And then also considering what types of support the commons offer to end users, since we know that oftentimes it's difficult for many communities to engage with commons. And so we see kind of inequitable reuse of the data. So maybe not necessarily data access, but inequitable kind of ability to reuse the data, whether that's inequitable access to funding or tooling. And so we're really interested in how commons are addressing benefit sharing mechanisms. So this relates to data ethics, which is a key concern for us, thinking about who is receiving the benefit of these shared digital public infrastructures. So benefit can look quite different. These are some benefits, there are other benefits. There's benefit negotiations going on right now in terms of the pandemic, the WHO pandemic treaty. There's a benefit sharing agreement that's coming out of that. But again, we think that benefit sharing is quite important for thinking about engagement with commons and also sustained support for commons, because if we don't have benefit sharing, then it would be difficult to have sustained support. So in terms of technical questions, we've asked questions about, again, data access mechanisms, metadata standards, persistent identifier strategies, And one thing that we're really interested in is how commons are addressing the challenge of permissions and access conditions. So what types of vocabularies are they using to enable, if they are machine actionable identification of the data that can be reused and reuse of these data through vocabularies or ontologies like ODRL and the data protection vocabulary. So obviously we're interested in data interoperability standards. So what types of standards have they implemented for different data types? And then we're interested in how they're tackling the challenge of provenance writ large. So we know that this is a large challenge for data and very important for health data, where we have to have transparent governance, and we're working towards transparent and verifiable provenance change. Um, so in terms of again, related to benefit sharing, we're asking detailed questions about AI tools and services provided. And the reason for that is to, again, understand who can really reuse the resources in the commons. Do we need kind of specialized knowledge to be able to reuse these resources? How easy is it to kind of generate information and benefit from the reuse of the data in the commons. And so we're interested in what types of tools are available. Also how commons support the use of AI to produce metadata or produce or to standardize data. We're interested in tools for data processing and again for verification. So we asked about this. And then we also were interested in commons future goals and plans for interaction with other commons. So we do know from just our colleagues in the health data commons space that commons are themselves talking to one another. So we have kind of this exchange of information. We'd like to have that exchange of information encoded in metadata. So that's what we're working on here. But we're really interested to understand, do commons have key performance indicators or benchmarks that they're using to assess the success, whether or not the commons are delivering on their stated objectives? What do they see as the primary challenges? What are their goals for the future in terms of expanding the commons? What are their priorities for interacting with health data commons? One of the goals of this working group was to kind of begin to develop a community of health data commons. And another key goal is to have the health data commons community interact with commons communities in other spaces. So the oceans data space or the animal health data space or the kind of One Health data space. So we have in human health, we have the need to interact with commons in other spaces to really understand and characterize what's happening in human health. And then we're working with kind of existing communities of practice within the health data commons space to see if they would be interested in engaging here. Because those communities of health data health data commons themselves tend to be kind of siloed by disease area or by data type. And so our interest is kind of bringing them together and thinking about how can we think about health data commons, biomedical data commons as a more comprehensive whole. So I mentioned we also have a scoping review. So we started the scoping review some time ago under the auspices of CoData. And we've been working to get through the different steps in a scoping review. So scoping reviews entail systematic search, title abstract screening, and then full text screening, and then extraction of the data. So you can see this is our status as of today. We are still working on these steps. So if anyone has a lot of free time and wants to contribute, then we'd be happy to have their help here. The idea is to supplement the findings from the survey. So to date, we've identified at least I'd say probably 60 studies that we're going to have to screen in. And so what that means is that these 60 studies are describing health data commons. A lot of them are describing the same commons. So there are many, many papers related to the European health data space, for example. But the idea is to see if there are health data commons that we can reach out to with a survey that we identify through the scoping review. And to understand what types of implementation decisions we can record through the scoping review when perhaps we don't have such a good response to the survey. So in terms of how you could be involved, we would love if you would take the survey. If you have a health data commons or biomedical data commons or space. If you don't have one, but you have colleagues that do, then we have an email introducing the survey that we'd be very happy if you could circulate. And that would be a tremendous help. And then we're again looking for participants in our working group, and we'd love to kind of bring in your network. So we know that everyone is coming from a different place in data commons or in health or biomedical data commons. We'd be very happy to try to engage your community. And we do have a working list of health data commons with kind of some basic information, their contact details that we are going to use to send the survey to. But we have not done that as of yet. So we're working on doing that. And then the other side of this is we are very happy to kind of add or amend questions in the survey. So one of the things that we were hoping for was to get kind of more community engagement in developing the survey, which we did have. But as the survey is kind of launched in different disease communities, we're very happy to ask more specific questions, for cancer or for imaging data reuse that are important for the folks who sit in that space. So we're very happy to amend the survey and add modules or whatever would make it more useful for folks who are working on health data commons. So I'll just thank you and open the floor for questions. This is basically the status of our work to date.
Thank you, Lauren. We have some questions in the chat I've seen, or comments. One is, of course, will we share this slide afterwards? And I think that is doable. I think we can provide a link maybe in the collaborative notes if it's possible. That would be the easiest way. And then Stephanie, you had a comment about the connections to the uptake of digital research infrastructure. Maybe you want to unmute and voice something about that?
Sure, I can do that. So that's an interest group that has been around for a little while, and we're looking at defining, well, at some point we're interested in looking at things like impact, but before we can do that, we want to understand what is uptake beyond just simple things like user numbers, download numbers, or job numbers, or stuff like that. So we have done some work defining different personas interested in digital research infrastructures and what we would like to know of them and what would they like to know about uptake. So we're currently working on a survey after having spent a bit of time defining some concepts. And we actually have a session in the next breakout. So in however many hours, about 6, I think, where we'll be talking about our survey and getting input from participants, hopefully, on finalizing that. So if you're interested, feel free to come along. But also, if you're interested in having a bit of a chat to us about outside of the plenary, feel free to reach out. Thanks.
Stephanie, just a quick follow-up. So you said that that's about kind of the impact of, could you just say again the objective?
Okay, so just to give you a bit of broader context. So a lot of my co-chairs work for the Australian Research Data Commons, and we invest in digital research infrastructure, or co-invest rather. And at some point, we want to know what we do actually has an impact, and a positive one, preferably, so make someone's lives better. But before we can look at things like impact, we actually have to look at things like uptake. So what does it mean? We put something out there and people use it, but very often uptake is reduced to things like how many users does it have, how many jobs are run, and whatever. And in my opinion, nude numbers are just not great, because if you have 5,000 people playing on a platform to just draw fancy maps, that's probably less useful than having 20 users on a platform that cure cancer. So there's certainly things we want to look into, and we're trying to get a better handle on what uptake could mean in a meaningful way, if that makes sense. And that's what we're working on at the moment.
I'll just make a brief comment. So I'm writing up the results of another scoping review. I just put the protocol in the chat. But what we did was we looked at the literature to see how do we measure the costs, benefits, and harms of biomedical data reuse, and the cost, benefits, and harms of not reusing the data. And we have finalized that review. So I could, I mean, it would be confidential. I can share you we haven't submitted it for publication as of yet, but we do have the findings. So I'd be happy to share that with you and to contribute to the survey, because I think this is really important. So this is something that I've been working on for a couple of years. Just again, takes quite some time to get this work done. But I think absolutely we need to think about how are we measuring impact, and we need to think about the impact of not doing it. Because that should be as an important, not reusing the data has its own impacts. And I think another thing is, what are the cost savings? So the work that we have to date in terms of cost is pretty limited. But I'm happy to kind of have an offline discussion and walk you through kind of what we found and how we think it's important.
That would be great.
Yeah. Jeff, go ahead.
I guess, so that, I mean, that's all a very impressive amount of work. I mean, here in Australia, I certainly know, well, we are working with Bob Grossman and, I guess harnessing the Gen 3 technology, and we are in the process of establishing a few genomic data commonses. And, I can imagine, I guess we're in the development phase of this, so being more aware of, I guess, where we should be thinking would be really great, and sort of thinking into the future. Just I guess, a comment or a question around logistics. Things like the survey and everything look great. I know there's some links to them in the slides, but are they findable through? I've just been looking at the RDA, website. Are there any plans or to make these more available and findable?
That's great. It's a great question since we're all focused on FAIR. So to be frank, I did not even think about that, or I think it just hadn't come to the top of, my to-do list in my head. So I just put the link in the chat. So the survey is open. We had been working on kind of a list of, the folks that we know in Health Data Commons that we wouldn't be emailing the same colleagues. But without data in the survey, I can't develop a data dashboard. So I'd really like to have some responses. So I'd very much appreciate sharing. And one thing, so at GA4GH this past fall, we had an interesting conversation about how can we demonstrate the value of genomic data commons. And I just put in a plug there that I think we're not doing a good job in terms of showing the value. And I think the approach really needs to be neutral. So this is a bit of a deviation from our topic today, but one thing that really doesn't kind of rise to the forefront for us because we're sitting in kind of research data reuse is that the reuse of data can cause harms. The reuse of data can be inequitable, and the reuse of data is not in the interest of many folks. So the incentive landscape does not support the reuse of data. And so I think we need to have transparent, verifiable and convincing metrics that don't just look at benefits, but they really look at harms, and they look at, again, the harms of using and not using the data. And I think if folks can, understand and buy into those metrics, then we have a better shot at making arguments for investing in digital public infrastructure for different data types and the value of health data. And we also have a better shot at addressing where we're not doing a good job. So where data reuse is hurting folks, or folks are not equitably included in either the representation of the data, the use of the data. So I think that's obviously like data equity and thinking about data benefits is really important.
I guess I have a follow-up. So that you said, so that the survey has a core set of questions, and then it appears that it goes into quite a lot of detail. Have you found, I mean, how have you found responses? Have they been, okay, we're just focusing on the 7, or have, because I can imagine, as we develop our commons, and again, it's in design, but we could presumably, I could work with groups to get very very complete responses. But that would require, I guess sometimes it's not always obvious at the planning stages where I guess you're going to fall on that sort of thing. So how does that impact, I guess, the study? Because I guess the commons could be built and then it would be very clear what the answers are. But if we're planning the commons and building them now, we may not be so sure. So I guess guidance on that would probably be useful for someone who was completing the survey as well.
Yeah. Those are great questions. So I can say that nobody has answered the survey. So you have a unique opportunity to be the first. So my feeling is that probably the folks who are motivated to answer this are going to be motivated to answer the three different kind of sections because they're not that technical. And I think that it won't be so hard to get through them. And, usually it's just even opening the survey is where people have a trouble. So I would say that again, I think like having a data dashboard is really important because then folks can see, oh, I'm contributing to this kind of community effort. And I think the reason to answer the survey is because you want to see other people's survey results. So you want to, you want to see where you're falling in this network graph. You bring up an interesting challenge, which is, what happens when folks are kind of at the beginning of their implementation journey and then they make different implementation decisions down the line. So one thing that's I've tried to get money for in the past, I haven't been successful, but I'm happy to join anyone to write a grant on, is how do we record basically, implementation level metadata for research infrastructures? And Doug Phils and Peter Pierluigi have done some interesting work on this in the oceans data space. So they developed a protocol that's been reused actually in the polar data space, where they federate the production of implementation related metadata for different research infrastructures. And the idea is that these should be living metadata. They shouldn't be, metadata from a survey or metadata that we find from a publication. And we need to engage commons or, health research, or let's say research infrastructures writ large in the representation of their metadata. So they've done a really nice job in the oceans community. And again, this was repeated in the polar community where they are recording structured metadata, and then different research infrastructures are tagged and they can review their metadata representation and fix it if it's not appropriate. So on a personal level, I'd be very happy to support anyone who's interested in that particular challenge, because in the health data space, we really need that. We have a very fractured and fragmented research infrastructure landscape. And what else we have is a complete lack of the kind of core trust seal certification. So it's hard for folks who are kind of going into that landscape to understand which research infrastructures to use, how research infrastructures relate to very basic kind of research data management concerns or trust related concerns for research infrastructure. So we're interested in that here at kind of a different level, but I think it's also something we need at a lower level. So if there are no other questions, I would just, again, invite folks, if any of this, resonates for you or is interesting to you, I would be very happy if you would join our working group. And we're very happy to modify the survey to suit the needs of any particular commons. So I will mention we reached out to GA4GH. They have something called the National Implementation Forum for Genomic Data Commons. So we're hoping that they will be interested in having their community answer our, let's say, call to participate in the survey. And again, we're interested in moving beyond the survey data to something that's more like what they did in the oceans and polar data space. We've talked to those folks, so we have a good idea of how to do that. But this work is done without funding, and to do that, we would need some funding. So again, if folks are interested in that, I'm happy to kind of provide the text from the other grants that I've written.
We can also maybe talk a little bit about, because we got a question around for pillar 2 and 3, would these extra fields go backwards to enrich the base GORC IM as well? I believe that the current practice that we have is that we will create a profile for the GORC IM that is specific to health data, so that and a profile in the GORC IM changes how the what fields are available to answer. So basically, it is a way of enriching without adding to the base, so that the base doesn't bloat. And this is the way we will incorporate the findings from this group into the GORC international model, is that it will be added as a profile. Whether this work will be finished within this working group or if it will be continued in the fall as a task force inside the GORC IM working group, that is yet to be determined. It depends on how far we get, how much community engagement we have in order to actually get to be able to put the actual JSON files in and actually doing the work of setting these nodes up and defining them, which is something we have not yet had time to start that. And as a comment on the Mikey Jetten, Mikey comment, sorry for maybe mispronouncing your name. She asked, she said, I joined the GORC workshop in Leiden last year. And they worked a lot on the model, and they found that it's not easy to complete it. Yes. The GORC IM has had some issues with how it's structured. It now has a much easier user interface that is downloadable, that you can look at. They will probably talk about that in the GORC session that will be later this week, as well as they have some other narrative approaches nowadays that came out of the Leiden workshop as a result of those. But those will be talked in the general GORC IM session. And would love to have some you guys complete the survey. That would be great.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the survey, we do have a question related to, are there additional questions that you would like to see, comments? So we're happy to, again, make any changes in the survey. And as soon as we have some responses, then we'll work on programming a dashboard to present the responses and try to motivate participation. Thanks for helping out. It's very sweet of you. I think the other thing that we're interested in, so one of the reasons that we started this was, we started this work some years ago in CoData, and we found that during COVID, folks who were trying to kind of stand up their own health and biomedical data commons were reaching out to us and saying, can you tell us about other, what are the commons doing? And so it seems timely, this is now, in 2019, but it's still timely to think about how can we create a community of commons? How can we kind of address kind of the fracturing we see along data type or along disease area or along population, and how do we really get to federated reuse of participant level data across commons? And then how do we link health data commons to commons in other domain spaces? And so if anyone has thoughts on, fora or places to work on this, then we'd be very happy to, support other people's efforts in this space. We did, so at the last RDA in Brisbane, there's a group, it's IDSA, the International Data Spaces Association. So this group, I think, is trying to do something similar. So, we had started some years before. But they are, anybody who was at their presentation in Brisbane would see that there are some parallels to what they were talking about and what we have been talking about. So we again have reached out to that working group. I think they're setting up a working group in RDA. And we're interested in, how can we kind of join forces here, because these are formidable challenges and really, require kind of the inputs of different communities and different folks. So we're happy to help support whatever initiatives you all have on hand.
We also have a question. How do you deal with the single person interested equals no interest from the organization part? You have struggled with that for quite some time, I think, Lauren, so maybe you can give some insights on that.
You mean like if you're part of an organization that's not particularly interested in like interoperability and data reuse? Or which, I think there are a lot of ways to interpret that question, so I'm not sure what the direction is meant to be.
Mika can talk.
Yeah, I could react. Sorry, jumping in and out. No, so I'm really interested in the GORC model and the application of the GORC model on various domains. So I've been in various sessions where I was interested more on the research data management part or more specific organization, in my case, Help Fry, the Netherlands. But I seem to be the only one interested. There is like a fake interest from we have a hub and node structure in the Netherlands. So there's fake interest from one of our nodes, one of the hospitals who would like to apply because they have been in sessions, in GORC sessions, in plenaries. But then it's always me trying to bring the GORC model to the organization, and I can do mapping, of course, and I can kind of see where we could improve. And we also try to work with the GORC because the Netherlands is also one of the EOS nodes. So we try to apply the GORC model there. But I would love to get my organization interested in there is a reason why I would do the mapping, because I'm not doing the mapping to help you guys, I'm doing the mapping to help us actually and become more harmonized across, as you explained, health data, various health data spaces. So I think it would definitely help the organization to be aligned to the commons and show where they could improve and where they're doing already good, or where they position themselves, where they could get more funding or whatever. But it seems to be, if I'm not putting the rope, then no one is doing that. So I can do any kind of mapping, but I need to share this impactful conveying story to my organization saying, hey, this is really worthwhile me investing time. So I just wonder if one of your organizations has been struggling with that, to bring the GORC model, the impact, the usefulness of the GORC model back to the organization, or the commons as such.
So I think this is a really great question. So I would say a few things. So I think a rising tide lifts all boats, or I don't know exactly the phrase, but the point is we need more folks to engage with these models, and we need more ways to help them engage. So CJ mentioned in the last GORC meeting that I attended that they are working on a dashboard to showcase kind of GORC implementations. And I think those are the kinds of things that are more convincing to the folks who are leading initiatives like Health RI, because they can see, I can look at where I fall in my community. So I think that is, I'd say, like the most important next step. Aside from that, if we don't have implementation metadata, we can't understand how different implementation profiles relate to different impacts. So I think we really have to tell better and more convincing impact stories and then relate that back to metadata. So if we have the implementation metadata, we could say, these folks are have this type of data governance framework, or these folks have this type of approach to access conditions and permissions, or these folks make their data available over an API, and look at the results of that. So I think if we don't connect the implementation metadata to kind of the value story, then we're really missing an opportunity to build the implementation metadata. So I think we need to make the point that if we don't have the implementation metadata, we can't talk about the value of open science because we don't know how these different structures differently relate to the value of data and the value of science. So I think that's the other side of it. But yeah, I'd say the most the easiest thing to do is the data dashboard, and CJ did mention that he's working on that, and we also are going to work on that when we have data.
Great, thank you.
So any other comments or questions from folks? This has been really nice to talk to people about this. Okay, so we have the link to the slides in the chat. We have the link to if you want to sign up to our working group, and even if you don't have time for that, which we fully understand, we'd be very happy if you circulated or completed the survey. And for folks who are interested in the scoping review, we're happy to engage you there if that would be of interest as well. But we really thank everyone for their time, and to those of you who have stayed up late or gotten up early for this, it's very meaningful to have you here. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that also exists inside that the common collaborative notes with the links to the survey and that will make sure that stays around. I will also make sure to send out a short email with thanking you for participating and with a link to the common or collaborative notes so that everyone has it in their email box for later use. So that we can get in touch with each other and see what we can accomplish together.